We are professionals. We are impact-driven. We are CFA Society Nigeria, a member society of the CFA Institute Global Network of Societies. Our mission is to promote the highest standard of practice in the Nigerian financial services industry and provide a vibrant community for our members. The CFA Charter signals the holders' commitment to professional excellence. As thought leaders, we collaborate with stakeholders to ensure adherence to ethical standards, better education for professionals, and to build market integrity. We are the leading voice for advocacy in the finance and investment industry in Nigeria. To partner with us or become our member, visit us at cfasocietynG.org for more details. CFA Society Nigeria, making finance a force for good.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first breakfast session for this year. My name is Frank Namuka, and I'm the treasurer of the CFA Society Nigeria. So before we start, it would be nice to know where you are joining from. You can use the chat button to indicate your location. And once more, I wish to welcome all of us to this session. The breakfast session is one of our member value proposition as a society, and it gives us the avenue or an opportunity to keep professional abreast of what is happening in the industry. So in such a way, we've sharpened their knowledge base and equally keep them in better position to serve the market and investors at large. So it's one of our professional development program in the industry. And today we'll be touching on proposed ISSB standard on sustainability and impact on the investment industry. Without much ado, we have invited experts in this area who are going to break down this for us to understand. And I would like to, at this point, hand over to the director, who is Emmanuel Ayegba. Thank you. We'll have a fruitful session.
Thank you very much, CFA Nigeria, for the opportunity to join this session. CFA Nigeria has been doing a great work in the investment space, providing capacity building for investment professionals and promoting the highest standards of investment practice. This is very, very commendable, and we ought to give CFA Nigeria, Society Nigeria, great credit for this effort. We should have some revenue partner for climate change and sustainability services, EY, West Africa, today, but he's on a very absent. So I will attempt to fill in for him today. So basically, I would attempt to share his reflections on the implication of the ISSB sustainability standards for the investment industry. It's an interesting development. I understand that professionals in the space are keeping a close eye on this, and I'm hopeful that our reflections today will provide something very important, something thought-provoking, and something you can take home. Thank you very much. I will try today to share reflections along the lines of the global push for sustainability integration and sustainability disclosure, something many of the participants today are most likely aware of. We'll try to look at the Nigeria reporting landscape and look at IFRS Foundation's journey to the ISSB sustainability standards. We will also try to do like an overview of, the standards, the disclosure requirements, which will be what investment professionals like you will be looking out for, and of course the implication, of the standards for the investment industry, and of course how should the industry respond. So in terms of the global push for sustainability disclosures, a number of trends have been driving this push. chief among the trends will be the pressure from investors. All right. Once in 2018, Larry Fink, the chairman and CEO of the largest investment firm in the world, they have close to $10 trillion in assets under management, sent a letter to CEOs and basically told them, hey, to the effect that you have to contribute to the society, or you most likely will lose our investment. So I can imagine, the CEOs getting that kind of letter from Larry Fink himself. So investors play a very important role, in shaping how businesses integrate sustainability and how they disclose their performance. Right? So of course, employees and consumers, are another interesting stakeholder group that's shaping sustainability integration and disclosures, of course, standard setters, government, regulators, and of course, the wider society. There are challenges, and we expect that businesses would take action. So despite the increasing focus on sustainability, there are varied approaches, to both integrating sustainability and disclosing performance. There are different boards. ISSB is the latest, so we'll be looking at that today. Then, of course, you have the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. I'm sure a number of us are familiar with GRI. We're familiar also with TCFD, TNFD is another one. Of course, the CDSB, that's the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. It's also another standards or framework provider, helping businesses, disclose, their performance on ESG issues. But the point here is that the standard boards use varying, approaches, to guide disclosures, and you will see how important ISSB's work will be, in terms of providing, a global baseline for disclosures. Okay, so looking at the Nigeria context, you would agree with me that the challenges and the issues that are driving sustainability integration and disclosures globally are also at play in Nigeria. We have social and economic challenges, climate risk is another one, pressure from stakeholders, also, especially host communities. These are creating the imperative for action, and disclosure of performance by companies. You want to think of some of the very important frameworks that have, that businesses have used to both integrate sustainability and manage disclosures. The Nigeria Sustainable Banking Principle comes to mind. Of course, that addresses basically the banking sector. The Nigerian Exchange Group also has sustainability disclosure guidelines for businesses that are listed on the Nigerian Exchange Group. But another very important movement in Nigeria that's driving disclosure, of course, is this convergence between financial and non-financial reporting. All right, we're seeing the push to have the movement, the integrated reporting movement is what I'm speaking about. All right, where we're saying, okay, can we have both the financial and non-financial, or that's sustainability related or ESG related disclosures all in one place, so that investors and professionals can have a better grasp, of what's happening, in the companies that they are investing in. Of course, in this regard, we give credit to the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, all right, which is the main driver of high quality financial reporting in Nigeria, all right, and the Nigeria Integrated Reporting Committee, which is basically the major advocate for integrated reporting. Okay, so the ISSB, which is the main issue, the main standards we're looking at today, the journey has been an interesting one, all right? Established in 2021, they have set out to provide a global baseline, all right, for high quality sustainability disclosure standards. that will meet the needs of investors. And that's very, very important when looking at the work of the ISSB. All right, the ISSB, which is, the standards boards, for the FIRS Foundation for Sustainability, seeks to provide a global baseline, for high quality sustainability disclosures. Again, it's important to mention this. We can mention this enough. The target is investors, all right, and the capital market. And I understand that professionals, many of the participants in this session, will be looking forward. And I understand that's the reason why the CFA Society Nigeria has thought it appropriate to look at this very interesting development. All right. Of course, it will address the need for consistency and for comparability of information. So there's a reporter in Nigeria, there's a reporter in Zimbabwe, there's another reporter in America. Using the ISSB standards, all right, the hope is that the information that will be released to investors, all right, on the ESG performance of companies will be such that, will be comparable and consistent. It's good to note that the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria has announced early adoption of the ISSB sustainability standards. Now, that's very good. So in case you're asking, what's the implication for Nigeria, and how early would Nigeria adopt? Already the Financial Reporting Council has announced that they're going to adopt the standards. That means that before long, businesses will be disclosing their ESG integration activities, and they are putting out disclosures, all right, for the capital market in Nigeria. All right. So what's the timeline looking at? By end of Q2 2023, we expect that the final standards, of course, it's in proposed format now. We expect that the final standards will be released. And then, of course, Q4 2023, the ISSB is looking at releasing. Don't forget right now, we'll look at that shortly. They have IFRS S1, all right, which is for sustainability related disclosures, and then IFRS S2, which is for climate related disclosures. So we expect that we're going to see the topic-based, standards over the coming years, beginning from 2023, Q4 2023. Of course, we'll look at some of the standards that have collapsed into the ISSB, and we will see the role that they will play in this regard. Of course, Q1 2024 is when we expect, that various jurisdictions will begin to apply the ISSB sustainability standards. Okay, so if we're asking ourselves, what are these standards? I already hinted them, but IFRS S1 is general requirements for disclosure of sustainability-related financial information. All right. The other one which I mentioned is IFRS S2 for climate-related disclosures. Again, for industry-based disclosures, ISSB will rely on the work that has been done by the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is SASB. They have a standards. That's what will be driving the industry-based disclosures by IFRS sustainability standards. So it's good for us to say, ask ourselves, what kind of disclosures, all right, will the ISSB require from businesses? What kind of disclosures will the capital market, the investors, expect to see from businesses? So fundamentally, and this is very important, all right, at a high level, information around ESG risks and opportunities is very pivotal to the ISSB sustainability standards. And of course, to put out the information, the recommendations are that businesses, companies will disclose along the lines of 4 thematic areas: governance, strategy, risk management, and of course, targets and metrics. Okay, so if we were asking ourselves, right, what will the disclosures look like? under, say, the governance pillar. Okay, for the governance pillar, you expect to have information to enable investors understand the governance processes, controls, and procedures used to monitor and manage significant sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Recall I mentioned risks and opportunities earlier. Expect this to basically to hear this over and over and over again, and it's a core issue for the ISSB sustainability standards. On the strategy, businesses, companies will be required to disclose information that will enable investors assess the company's strategy for addressing significant sustainability-related risks and opportunities. So whether these risks or opportunities that are incorporated into strategic planning, including financial planning, and whether they are core to the business or the company's strategy. Of course, you have risk management, where the ISSB expects that companies will provide information that will enable investors to understand the process by which the company identifies, assesses, and manages both current and anticipated ESG-related risks and opportunities. And of course, targets and metrics speaks to information that will enable investors to understand how a company measures and monitors monitors and manages significant related risks and opportunities. Of course, focuses on the performance and the targets that the company has set. So I would just kind of mention, because it's important for us to understand that the ISSB succeeded in collapsing a number of standards, and you find a thread with all the standards that the ISSB has successfully, collapsed into one. The SASB standards I mentioned that will be important in driving the industry-based disclosures for the new standards. All right. Of course, the IFRS S1 draws significantly from the SASB standards. I will just go to the next one, TCFD. I don't intend to kind of dwell too much on the details, but just to ensure that we have like a fair idea of, the various frameworks. Of course, TCFD, is the touchstone, for the ISSB sustainability standards. And indeed, that approach, that thematic approach, which I mentioned, the four thematic approach, the approach that I mentioned earlier, draws from the TCFD, actually adopted wholesale from the TCFD, of course, with adjustments, you would understand. Of course, integrated reporting, which we say is going to be the future of reporting. Convergence between financial reporting or financial disclosures, and non-financial disclosures. All right, integrated reporting framework is another standard, another framework that was collapsed into the ISSB sustainability standards. And of course, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board is another framework, all right, that has been collapsed into the ISSB. Now, the important thread for all these frameworks is that they are investor focused. They want to provide information, useful information, high quality information on the ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance risks and opportunities that companies and businesses face. Because for investors, it's important. How do you determine, and I think that's the important question really, how do you determine enterprise value? And I know this is an important question for all, and almost all the participants, on this breakfast session. How do you determine enterprise value? Of course, how you determine enterprise value has a direct connection to capital allocation, right? So what the ISSB has done successfully, I would say, is to integrate a number of investor-focused disclosures, all right, to ensure that investors, and professionals like you will have, at the end of the day, have useful, high-quality information on the ESG risks and opportunities that companies and businesses face. Of course, I should mention, also, I'm sure you're asking, you've heard about GRI, a lot, and so many businesses in Nigeria have used the GRI. What's going to be the fate of the GRI in the ISSB sustainability disclosure standards. And it's good for us to mention that, yes, the GRI has a multi-stakeholder approach, meaning every possible stakeholder, from investors to host communities to regulators to people, but the ISSB is very singular in its focus on investors and the capital market, right? So the hope is that I understand that there is a collaboration between the ISSB and GRI, all right, that they would align capital market and all the multi-stakeholder standards that GRI, recommends, right, to create an interconnected approach for sustainability disclosures. That is still in its early phase, and we'll see how that would pan out. Okay, so we're asking ourselves as investment professionals, what will be the implication of this of the ISSB sustainability disclosure standards? What will it look like? What would it be the implications for the capital market? All right. I think fundamentally, like we have tried to highlight, the core will be that, one, there will be information on risks and opportunities that businesses carry that investors would like to know about, and then for investors to basically take the information and the disclosures, the high quality disclosures that will be coming out, and then basically make decisions, about what value, to place, on a company, on a business. Okay, so we expect that you have more access to a global baseline of high quality disclosures, right? The ISSB sustainability standards is set to have a significant impact on the investment industry because of the focus of the standards on the delivery of a comprehensive global baseline. We already mentioned that. All right. The expectation is that investors and professionals like you are yearning for high quality sustainability disclosure, and the ISSB hopes to kind of meet this. So you, with the adoption of the standards, investors and other providers of capital will likely have more access to decision useful sustainability information about businesses. All right. As Mary Shapiro, the head of the TCFD Secretariat, all right, said that the development of the ISSB global baseline will deliver transformative change in sustainability disclosures for the financial markets. So a global baseline of high quality information is what we would expect to see. And I'm sure that investment professionals like you will have, once we have widespread adoption, would have so much information, to use in making decisions for investors. Another implication will be better assessment of risks and opportunities. Better assessment of risks and opportunities. The ISSB standards recommends an approach that is grounded on the identification of risks and opportunities. We mentioned already that this approach to risk and opportunities is like the core, it's at the very core of the ISSB sustainability standards. So really, if you remove it, you wouldn't have the ISSB sustainability standards. Okay, so this approach to disclosures is essential for financial markets to assess the ESG risk and opportunities facing a business. All right, like we said, such risks affect, how we determine enterprise value. Okay, as the chair of the IFRS Foundation Trustees noted, she said that the sustainability and particularly climate change is the defining issue of our time. So to properly assess these related opportunities and risks, investors require high quality, transparent, and globally comparable sustainability disclosures that are compatible with the financial statements. Okay, at this point, I should mention that we are familiar with the work of the IASB, all right, which is the board, the IFRS board that is responsible for providing guidance, the standards for disclosure of financial information. So think about the ISSB, of course, as a sister organization, but the focus in this particular case of the ISSB is to provide sustainability disclosures that investors, can use. And of course, what would that mean? Like we mentioned there, is for better assessment of risks and opportunities in the capital market and the investment industry. Of course, more comparable ESG reporting in financial markets is going to be another important implication. Like we saw earlier, currently we have a wide variety of frameworks, all right, that are guiding sustainability disclosures. Okay, they have various approaches, to how businesses should report disclosures. So what ISSB hopes to achieve, right, will be that you would have a standard that will enable comparability. The ISSB standards seek to achieve globally comparable reporting on sustainability matters in the financial markets. So like we say, so if you have a report, if an investor who has invested in businesses in Nigeria, in Mexico, all right, in say France, for example, these are different jurisdictions, right? If the report with the ISSB sustainability disclosure standards, right, the expectation would be that you have the same set of the not exactly, but close to the same set of metrics, for assessing the enterprise value of the businesses across various jurisdictions. That will be an improvement over the current arrangement where you have different approaches, to reporting and disclosing sustainability performance. Okay, all right. So of course, the ISSB hopes to leverage the experience of the IFRS Foundation in creating the accounting standards. I mentioned the IASB earlier. All right, it hopes to leverage that experience. All right, which is very successful in about more than 140 jurisdictions. The hope is that it will leverage the experience of the IFRS Foundation in creating standards that will have a wide adoption and would ensure comparability of ESG reporting in financial markets. All right, as the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab said, creating long-term value requires both a focus on financial and sustainability performance. This means that we need tools for measuring sustainability performance, just as we have for financial performance. We have made that point earlier. That's what the ISSB standards hopefully will do for the investment industry. Of course, if you're thinking about another implication, I'm sure will be the need for capacity building. All right, to say investment professionals will need to increase their capacity. Just like businesses and companies will need to increase their capacity to be able to, handle or rather do high investor-focused, high-quality disclosures. So you have that particular need for capacity building on the side of the companies themselves. All right, and then on the part of the investors. So investors will have to grow the capacity of their teams, and the investment professionals will need to upskill to be able to identify and interpret the decision-useful ESG disclosures that companies will be putting out. Like I'm sure that maybe David Carlin would handle later. The climate-related disclosures, are more scientific, in nature because of the subject matter. Okay, so it is good for professionals, to have this at the back of their mind if they're asking, what the implications will be for the investment industry. Capacity building, upskilling will be very, very key. Doug Johnston, the EY UK Climate Change and Sustainability Practice Lead, noted that investors are looking for reassurance that companies understand the linkages between the non-financial performance of the business and the successful delivery of the business strategy. This, of course, being able to establish this link would not be possible without capacity building. And being able to put out the kind of high quality and decision useful information or disclosures that investors need would require capacity building. We can't mention this enough. Of course, which is the very, the very climax of the implication, of the standards, of the ISSB standards for the investment industry. We expect that, it will lead to more ESG-driven capital allocation decisions, that will have more ESG-driven capital allocation decisions. Alignment with decision useful disclosures on risks and opportunities, we expect will likely trigger the interest of more investors and capital market players in the sustainability disclosure of Nigerian businesses. All right. Of course, for every jurisdiction, for businesses across various jurisdictions, we expect that, with decision useful disclosures, more investors and more investment professionals will be asking, okay, I think there's more in this, disclosure for us. So this is likely, to be one of the major factors that will influence the capital allocation activities of investors. And I see that investment professionals, many of whom are on this breakfast session, will have something to say about this. All right, like the Financial Council of Nigeria noted, disclosure by corporates on these matters has the potential to unlock international investment into Nigerian businesses to support their transition to sustainable and resilient business models. I have gone on for a while, and I think I will just try to bring this to a close, by noting, all right, that for the industry, what is important? We don't need to wait, all right? Both investors, and report preparers, no need to wait for the reporting to be mandated. Action is very important, okay? Of course, put ESG and sustainability reporting on the board's agenda, because the board is important in providing oversight for whatever happens within the business. Of course, the finance function will play a very important role, all right, because they have experience with financial disclosures already. And of course, collaborate with peers and learn from their reporting experience. Required skills and capacity building will be another important issue, which we mentioned. Of course, for investors, and companies, doing a sustainability gap analysis, to test and check ISSB compliance readiness will be the next step. I thank you very much for the opportunity to share the reflections of our partner, Samuel Agbebem, right, on the ISSB sustainability standards, all right? But I will close with this, that using the words of the Zainab Ahmed, the outgone Minister of Finance and Budget Planning, she said, the ISSB standards, that is, has the potential to attract investment and boost private sector development. But developing standards is just one step in the journey to ensuring capital markets have access to robust sustainability-related information. She says, we look forward to working with the ISSB and partners to deliver strong advisory and capacity building support necessary to bring the implementation of this global baseline to life. Indeed, we need collaboration between all players, investors, the investment professionals like you, companies, their leaders, and indeed other stakeholders in the capital market. We all have a part to play to ensure widespread adoption of the kind of disclosures that you all would like to see under the ISSB sustainability disclosure standards. I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope that we still have just 1 or 2 minutes for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Emmanuel Ayegba, for that very high quality presentation on the ISSB sustainability standards. You have taken us through the history, the historical aspects, and you have brought us to the current state of play, talking through the global markets and also the Nigerian financial environment. So as investment practitioners, investment professionals, we are on the lookout for how these standards impact our decision-making, how the sustainability standards impact our current base of knowledge. We've been taught, or we've learned so many financial models, efficient market hypothesis, the CAPIM, and so much knowledge around mean variance optimization, efficient market hypothesis, So how does the integration of these externalities, how does it impact what we'll be doing forward and going forward? You did present an outlook by the Financial Reporting Council, which I found very interesting. It stated that there was a huge potential for the sustainability standards to forge greater investment into the Nigerian financial environment, which would help our businesses and local communities in transforming into more sustainable standards and enable the just transition. So I found that very interesting. We certainly have questions, and we'll be taking you through some of them. There's a question now on how does the ISSB sustainability standards help prevent greenwashing?
Okay, so we expect that the proposed standards, and indeed when released, will be something that gives us, again, the focus is high quality financial, so sustainability related disclosures. That's what the focus is. All right, and with that kind of focus, the expectation is that, one, you are either speaking to investors clearly, all right, or you are not speaking to them at all. And I guess that focus, on investors is basically something that has been built into the ISSB disclosures, all right, to help to ensure that you prevent stuff like greenwashing. If you have just general, information on that addresses or attempts to speak to various stakeholders on various metrics and various issues, the tendency will often be that eventually you don't have something that is that's focused. So the expectation will be, is that the ISSB Sustainability Disclosure Standards provides a framework, all right, which all serious, businesses that want to disclose their performance to investors. And I think that's a very interesting thing. Investors often have the tools, and professionals like, many of whom are on this call, in this session, have, you can tell something that is that's detailed and substantive from something that is not substantive. Okay, so we expect that, one, the standards will provide the tools, all right, for information to be provided in a manner that investors can use to determine enterprise value. Because don't forget, that is the focus. You want to put out information that's important for investors, in helping to see what the risks and opportunities, are. So for me, I think that focus on investors, the focus on risks and opportunities, that's just where it stays, right? Would indeed prevent, the possibility for greenwashing. Of course, you won't still stop businesses who want to greenwash when they put out disclosures, right? But I can imagine that investment professionals, would see through all that, okay, and won't consider such information to be decision useful. I think I will stop there.
Okay, we anticipate more questions from our audience. In a few minutes, we'll be moving on to our second speaker, David Carlin, who is from one of the standard setters, which has been adopted by the ISSB. So we'll move on to him in a few minutes. But before then, we want to take more questions. But Emmanuel, I would have a question for you. Okay. So as a business owner, as a CFO in a Nigerian quoted company or even an unquoted company, why should I care about implementing the sustainability standards? Why should I be a front runner? What are the benefits for me, and what are the risks if I don't comply?
Okay, so if you're asking about what the benefits are, the thing about sustainability integration with a global, with a leading practice like what the ISSB sustainability standards intends to, it's proposing, is that, one, it helps your strategy as a business. You have a clear understanding of the risks and opportunities, that you are faced with as a business. Okay, so you are looking at, whether along environmental lines, along social lines, along governance lines. You are clear-headed as a business about the risks and opportunities that face your business. And I think that beyond what you're putting out to investors, right? As a business owner, that is a very important value. Like that's the kind of thing you pay. That's the kind of thing you pay consultants for, right? So having a good grasp of the risks and opportunities that face you as a business lets you know that integrating sustainability and using a standard like the ISSB Sustainability Disclosure Standards will be, a benefit for you. There's no how. It's all upsides. Okay, from the point of view of regulation, then you have a risk there, right? If the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, of course they have adopted it, we expect that it's going to be integrated into the local frameworks for disclosures, just like you have financial disclosures, right? Then for you as a business, if it's important for you to begin to make plans, you do not want to lose the interest of investors. You don't want to lose their investment, right? If their investment is cut off from your business, that's an existential risk, in my own assessment. Okay, so it's important. Non-compliance is not good. Of course, it brings penalties, right? But then you look further than that. If you're supposed to comply and investors say that you don't comply, then of course you're going to lose their investment. I imagine that will happen.
Okay, we will still take more questions. Thank you for explaining that. As a follow-on from one of the questions which had been asked earlier, there's a question on, what does greenwashing mean? Because there had been a question that how does the ISSB standards help prevent greenwashing? So a participant wants to know, what does it mean? What is greenwashing?
Okay, so I'll try to characterize greenwashing, as trying to present a picture, all right, trying to demonstrate the practices that a business has that indeed it does not integrate. So if you have disclosures, sustainability disclosures often becomes an opportunity for businesses to try to say, okay, they are making XYZ progress on a particular set of topical issues. So take climate change, for instance. A business would attempt to put out, all right, that they are making bold progress, all right, on emissions reduction, all right, as an environmental issue, all right, based on a particular initiative which they consider to be addressing climate change and emissions reduction. All right, but if you do not have if you don't have a science-based or driven system for determining the specifics, if indeed the initiative the company has attempted to represent, if you don't have a framework that allows the company to break down and tell us indeed if the claims they are making about the progress on climate change and emissions reduction, if you don't have a framework that requires them to put out or disclose in a specific and a detailed way, then you would have an instance of greenwashing where businesses are misrepresenting their actual performance, on topical issues. Climate change being one of the major issues where you most likely will have something like greenwashing.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. You had mentioned misrepresentation, and I think that's the key word when it comes to greenwashing. We also have a chart which says greenwashing is when you raise funds under a green bond and use it to finance a non-green project. So it's mainly around a misrepresentation. Okay, there is another question around the, we have a wide range of standards, regulations. You had mentioned some of them, the Global Reporting Initiative, CSRD, ESRS, there's so many of them. The ISSB is trying to put them under an umbrella. And so there's a question which says, closely tied to the above, for institutions already using the IFC performance standards, are they required to run the ISSB standards concurrently with the IFC performance standards? So that's a question from the participants.
Okay, so to that, I would say that the local frameworks, all right, and other global frameworks that businesses are using currently, all right, to report their performance or disclose their performance on ESG issues. I expect that business will make a decision about what frameworks to keep, what frameworks to adopt. I would expect that the approach will be that with regard to their existing, to the existing frameworks, right, that businesses use to disclose their performance, all right, say like the IFC performance standards for a business that's using that. It will be a question of saying, okay, how do I integrate the ISSB standards into the current range of frameworks that I report to? That will be the approach, to integrate the ISSB into the existing frameworks that you are using. You are not going to say, oh no, I have the ISSB now, so I will not report to, say, the IFC standards, or I will not report to the CBN Nigerian sustainability standards for the banking industry. Sure, it will make sense for you to keep all the standards, integrate new ones, all right, and make your disclosures better and more decision useful for investors.
Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel. We still have more questions, but before then, I'll just take you through a question again, which has come in, which says, could you give specific examples? So you had mentioned ESG and the purpose of the ISSB standards, being able to integrate some of these non-financial reporting factors, into financial reporting. So you're looking at it as a form of corporate reporting. So they want you to give specific examples of some of these factors. So, we've talked about a number of these things. You mentioned emissions, which is more of an environmental factor. But could you give examples of other environmental factors, social factors, and governance factors?
Okay. So if you say speaking about a social factor, for example, something like license to operate, okay, thinking about risks and opportunities on an issue like license to operate is a social issue, okay? So if you operate in a host community, all right, how the community feels the impact of your activities will be an important factor for you to disclose or consider as a business. So because if you do not consider that as an important social factor, tendency is that you will lose the license to operate. All right, the host community sees you as a business, that they cannot collaborate with. The implication of that, you can only imagine that. Okay, so that's social. So governance, for example. Okay, so issues, around corporate governance are very, very key to, how the investors assess, what the expectations or how the business is able to deliver on its strategy. So without robust corporate governance, all right, investors are most likely going to think that, oh, this is a key, key risk. If you don't have good corporate governance, this is a key risk. The implication will be that the business is not in a good position, all right, to carry on business into the future, all right. So being able to implement whatever it says are its goals, and the objectives. So that's an issue on the governance. Let me see if we have another issue for under social. For another issue under social will be depending depending on the business now. No, this is where you could go into the industry-specific issue. So for businesses in hotspot sectors, say construction, all right, health and safety and well-being of employees, for example, it's a core issue for you. You don't take that issue into consideration, you don't see the risks, you don't see the opportunities, then you don't have the people that would drive your business, right? So it depends. So you're looking at the sector that you're operating in as a business, and you will find a number of issues, that are often common with your sector, whether they are social issues, whether they are governmental issues, governance issues, or whether they are environmental issues. Oil and gas, for example, you can imagine that you have massive environmental considerations there, right? Construction, you imagine that you have serious concerns around biodiversity, all right, health and safety, for instance. Okay, if you're in finance, so you're thinking about environmental and social risk assessments, for the businesses that you finance. Okay, ESG considerations for investments, so. Of course, financial inclusion, for example, you're thinking about data privacy, data protection, if you are into telecoms, for instance. So depending on what the sectors are, you would find a number of material issues. I think that's the word. You find a number of material issues, that apply to the sector, all right, that apply also to your business. And it's important to kind of think along the lines of the risks and the opportunities, that these issues present to your business.
Hey, thank you very much, Emmanuel. One more or two more questions. I would also want you to address, questions around single materiality, double materiality. You did mention, for example, that a number of quoted companies in Nigeria already adopt the GRI, which is a double materiality standard. So is the upcoming ISSB standards, is it a single materiality standard? Is it a double materiality standard? And how do companies, I know you talked earlier around integrating, but as a fresh starter, what should I go for? Should I go for single materiality or should I go for double materiality?
Okay, so I think to the first question, ISSB sustainability standards, takes the single materiality approach, all right? Of course, we're looking at, the risks and the opportunities, that the business, carries, okay? And the investors would, be looking to understand what those risks, and opportunities are, for their investment in a company, all right? So the GRI, of course, takes the double materiality, approach. Of course, the focus is on the impact of the company on the whether it's the environment, whether it's the economy, on stakeholders, or on the impact of the the environment on the practices, on the business, how this affect the risks, and the opportunities. So of course, double materiality involves, an outward, both an outward and an inward approach to assessing materiality. What should a business do? I think the approach often is just start the way you can, because they often the advice, for businesses is disclosures can be very, very onerous. We all agree, all right? So for businesses to understand that it's a journey. So you start at whatever level you are starting today. The expectation is continuous improvement, all right? From year to year, you should have better disclosures, okay? So again, it depends on the framework that you are adopting. So if you decide to use GRI, if you're using GRI, already you are doing double materiality, right? So, so for you, worrying about the ISSB, the approach to the ISSB would now be, okay, I use the word integration, would now be to say, okay, what are the disclosures required by ISSB sustainability standards? How do I build that on my existing disclosures, right? If you follow the guidelines for disclosing, you basically will be fine. You're basically adding on, the ISSB disclosure requirements to your existing, say, GRI disclosures. So that's the way I think we'll look at it. But for the business that is beginning, the first thing is to do an ISSB sustainability standards assessment. All right, to say, okay, what are the capacities that I have? All right, what capacities do I need to build? What structures do I need to put in place? How do I, say, for example, governance? Do I have the right approach? Do I have the right structure to governance? So asking these questions, in the process of doing a readiness assessment, I think will be the first step, for businesses. All right, you could do it at high level or very granular and very detailed. Whichever way, if you're a small business, I can expect that it is still high level, right? So do it anyways. And I think that the effects will be rewarding.
Okay, and I think my final question to you would be around social issues, disclosure of social issues. There is a requirement really in Nigeria, for example, for a value-added statement. So you actually disclose what portion of the value created during the year has been assigned to various stakeholders, government, the employees, and the likes. But specifically, you find out that there are major campaigns, social campaigns, and that's another area which perhaps we'll be able to address, as we look at these standards going forward. But you find out that there's social campaigns around what is a living wage, minimum wage issues, the use of contract employees in certain industries. So what would be your advice, for example, for practitioners in sectors like this, particularly when it comes to having to make these disclosures? So what is the minimum baseline, and what more do I need to do?
Okay, that's a broad question. Okay, but let's look at it this way. I think my approach will be to say, for pressing issues, right, make the efforts to follow leading practices. All right. The effort to follow leading practices is very important. But again, we have to understand businesses are starting at various levels, right? So can you, at whatever level, do a current state assessment to say, okay, this is where I am as a business, and these are the issues, that I'm reporting. Of course, we expect that the investment professionals, looking at whatever disclosures you're putting out, will make their decisions. Okay, but for every business, to think about it as a journey, and allow the investment professionals, to make their decisions, I think will be the way to start. Then to say, okay, where do I intend to be? Where do I want to go? Sorry, what's my target? All right, so if I select a set of leading practices, often following frameworks will be it. Okay, so you mentioned a number of social issues, for example. The ILO, the International Labour Organization, all right, it's a very important, again, it's topic specific, right? Depending on whatever topics. Find as a business, all right, and of course, investment professional, you find the leading frameworks on the various topical issues that you intend to, to assess disclosures on, all right, and basically integrate. For me, I think just start somewhere, okay? Keep your eye on the prize in terms of this is where you want to get to in terms of the quality of the disclosures and quality of practices that are being integrated, all right, into the business, all right, and then basically work towards it. Of course, creating a roadmap will be very important to say, okay, year one, we should be able to integrate this level of practices and disclosures to accompany them. Year two, we hope to achieve this. Year three, you can create that roadmap. Of course, you're not going to be penalized. Well, you're not going to, if you do not meet it, that is not going to be a problem, all right? You can make the effort, to get better next year. I think investors essentially want to see progress. Can you demonstrate through disclosures that, one, you are integrating sustainable practices, all right, over time, and are you making progress? Where you're unable to make progress, the expectation is that you would disclose to say, okay, we had plans to make XYZ progress. We couldn't make this progress. These are the factors. These are the issues that prevented them from making this progress. These are the measures we're taking to address. Actually, every investor understands high quality disclosures when they see them, right? And I think that external assurance will play a great role in helping the investment industry to have high confidence, in the disclosures and the sustainable practices that the business, is integrating across whatever topical issue and across whatever concern, whether it's labor, wage, whatever issue it is. I think that would be the approach. I hope that my response kind of works.
Yes, your response certainly works. Your response certainly works. And then finally is from your experience, do you think that there is value to be gained? Is there value from having, having good values and disclosing those values? Does it add any value to your business? You talked about enterprise value. Would my enterprise value go up if I have good disclosures, or do I need good disclosures in order to have an improved enterprise value? So what's your assessment of that?
So, yes, the more disclosures you have, all right, on sustainable practices, investors will make their decisions, right? I mentioned earlier with the issue in 2018 with Larry Fink, of BlackRock, sending out a letter to businesses to say, you have to have contribute to society. Interpret that to mean you have to have sustainable practices that create value for society. All right. So if you don't have it, such practices, and if you're not disclosing them, all right, then sure, investors would make a decision about, not investing. I think that basically there's a direct line between enterprise value and that particular decision, right? For some investors. Of course, disclosing sustainable practices, all right, disclosing risks and opportunities, that the ESG risks and opportunities, and indeed sustainable practices that a business carries, helps investors to basically tell that, one, the business has thought through the risks and opportunities. There's a value for the business for doing that. We said something about clarifying your strategy earlier. For the investor who is looking at the business, they're saying, okay, management has plans in place to address or has identified risks and opportunities and has put plans in place, to respond to these risks and opportunities. I think that says a lot, about whether that business can indeed, make progress or not. It says something about whether that business has a chance to survive. I think it does. And I think investors would make the right decisions. Investment professionals would see through the disclosures and would make decisions as appropriate. So yes, there's value in it, and every business should look forward to one, implementing sustainable practices and disclosing them using leading frameworks. There's value all around. I don't see a downside.
Okay, so I'll just take this last question and then we move into our polls. A participant wants to know, how do the new standards, how do they impact MSMEs?
Okay, so for MSMEs, for businesses in that segment, yes, the challenge will be that, one, a number of them have not reported before, right? So if they have investors who are asking them to begin to disclose using the standards, I can imagine that, the impact, for them, all right, will be in terms of, the capacity to disclose, all right, will be quite asking. It's good to acknowledge that, all right. So for businesses in that category, let's see again, all right, what the recommendations will be from the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. It's always good to kind of have that at the back of your mind, because if you could choose to voluntarily, let's recognize that, all right, disclose, which is good, all right, for your investors. But if your investors are asking that you disclose, that's something you have to consider. Can you develop the structure, however small you are starting, all right, and have a plan, to fully adopt? That is one approach, all right? Then if you are listed, for example, or even if you're not listed, all right, but if a regulator, comes in and mandates it, then you don't have any choice. So we have to look at this range of factors. But I think that the approach will be for a small business, begin to think about these issues. All right, like we said, you could choose to look at this, look at your readiness at the high level, okay? Then take it from there. What are the gaps? How can I close those gaps? Or as a small business, do I even have the governance structure in place? That is something that, the ISSB sustainability standards recommends. So you want to start from there. If you don't have the structure, the governance structure in place, then you need to take that as, take that. Then have a plan, an implementation plan. However high level or small it is, just have a plan. So I think that would be the way to go about it. Sure, to have significant impact on small businesses and MSMEs.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you this morning. And thank you to Samuel Agbeben, who unfortunately could not be here. It's been a worthwhile conversation, I believe, and we extend our thanks to you. We'll be calling back as the standards kick in for further interpretations. So thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the opportunity.
We go.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll take a poll, and then we'll call in our second speaker, who is David Carlin. I believe he's somewhere around and will join us soon to take us through the S2, the climate disclosure standards. But before then, we will quickly take our poll questions. Gloria, can we take the first poll, please? Okay, so let's get your answers. Let's get participant answers to these questions. The first is, to what extent do you think climate change factors are reflected in the systematic risk of the Nigerian equity markets? So we just want to see the extent to which the efficient market hypothesis is reflected in our markets. Okay, so we'll run down this poll now. We have predominant, I'll be sharing the results, predominantly 60% say it's not reflected at all. And then 29% say it currently impacts entity cash flows, while 10% say it affects the discount rate. So that shows that as financial analysts and investment professionals, we do have some work to do when it comes to analyzing financial statements for impact factors. So let's look at the next poll. Let's take the next poll. Yeah. Okay, so this says, which sector do you think has the greatest opportunity to accelerate emissions reduction in Nigeria? Which sector do you think has the greatest opportunity to accelerate emission reduction in Nigeria? So we have financial services, oil and gas, manufacturing, and the service sector. Again, there are no right or wrong answers to these things. It's just we're trying to assess understanding of the markets. Okay, so I'll end the poll now, and we'll see the results. From the results, we have predominantly the oil and gas sector, as expected. 54% think that that sector has the greatest opportunity to accelerate emissions reductions. And next is manufacturing, 20%. And finally, financial services. Okay, so we'll find out as David takes us through his presentation, what role financial services plays or will play in the climate agenda. And let's take the last poll. Okay, so in your opinion, do you think that ESG is the same as sustainability? So I'll end the poll in another 30 seconds. Okay, so 70% believe that ESG is the same as sustainability, while 27% say they are not the same, and then 3% not sure. So on this basis, I would move on to our next speaker, who is David Carlin. So David is head of risk at the United Nations Environmental Programme Finance Initiative. David leads the risk programming for UNEP FI. He has worked with over 100 financial institutions on topics of climate scenarios, climate risk assessments, and sustainability regulation. He's a very busy person. This morning, we had to call him out of a meeting with the central bank. So we're happy to have you, David. He and his team support financial actors across the world to develop best practices for managing environmental risk and identifying environmental opportunities. So risk and opportunities, as Emmanuel mentioned. He advises UNEP FI's task force on nature-related financial disclosures and the Net Zero Banking Alliance. David has also been a technical advisor to the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. He's a founder of Cambion Global Solutions, which helps governments, corporations, and financial institutions address the most pressing environmental challenges and thrive in a changing world. He's a contributor to Forbes, where he writes about climate change and leadership, and a senior associate at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. David has worked as a principal in finance, risk, and public policy for Oliver Wyman and in model risk for PNC Bank. His background is in quantitative modeling and decision science. David has conducted research in financial decision-making at Carnegie Mellon University and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Williams College. So David, it's a pleasure to have you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm gonna take us through predominantly the S2 standards, but I also wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of the entire ISSB process and where disclosure stands at present and how things are evolving over time. So I will start with that and then go into some of the specifics as mentioned for S2. So in a lot of ways, the S2 disclosure from the International Sustainability Standards Board is the successor to the work of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So that work is increasingly being used and adopted in a number of jurisdictions. It's increasingly being considered across the world as a way to create a common baseline on reporting. What the ISSB's work will do is really aim to enhance both the sustainability-wide and climate-specific disclosures that already exist. What we can see is that the expectation is by the end of June, we'll see the release of these standards, with the idea that their reporting periods will begin in 2024. The final versions will take the 11 pillars of TCFD and the four main elements, which are governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets, using each of them fully, and then we'll build on them. On the sustainability side, which you've probably seen, ISSB standards, the CDSB's framework, and the integrated reporting framework are all being put together. And then groups like IOSCO, who are working on securities regulation, and individual jurisdictions will choose their desired means of adoption, whether to adopt directly or to adopt and adapt. And so I'm not going to speak too much about S1 because, as mentioned, that was covered previously, as I understand it. S2 on the climate-related disclosures is really the one, as I was saying, that is focused on what is going on in the space of disclosure around climate and climate-related financial risks and opportunities. There are a number of resources that the ISSB has provided, including comparing the existing TCFD recommendations with the exposure draft S2. They've also looked at the work from the Technical Readiness Working Group and its exposure drafts, and it's provided a high-level summary of the requirements and recommendations. As mentioned, the four pillars are relevant: governance, strategy, risk management, metrics and targets, both for the sustainability specific draft, but also for the climate specific one. This is the first thematic standard. There are plans to issue nature and social and other ESG related specific standards in the future, but climate is the first. There's expected compliance with the ISSB that will be aligned to the TCFD, as I've said. It also will incorporate for industry standards the work that ISSB is doing, and then adding guidance, especially around the financial sector and its disclosure. So if that's kind of the landscape and overview of where this sits, just to give a view of how this compares to the TCFD, what we see is when it comes to the initial exposure draft, we have a view that additional information is going to be requested around governance. So the two governance disclosures of TCFD will be retained, but asking more about what skills the board and senior management has, as well as what controls are in place. In addition, on the strategy side, transition plans will be also expected under this disclosure, as will granular information on the responses from how different parts of the strategy are being implemented with climate in mind. In terms of risk management, the expectation will be also to prioritize opportunities rather than simply risk. And then in terms of metrics, there are ISSB relevant metrics that have been suggested, as well as standards for things such as the weighted average carbon intensity and the PCAF methodologies for financed emissions. There's also expectation on how targets are set and comparisons of targets to prior target setting to track progress. So these are some of the main elements in that climate exposure draft. I'm going to switch over now and just from some of the work that the IFRS Foundation has done, share a little bit about that with you here, and then we will be able to go from there. So I'm going to just, as mentioned, share a different document here. The first one I shared can certainly be shared. The second one I'll need permission of the IFRS Foundation to share it. So it may be something that we can share at a later date or upon release. As mentioned, the climate-related disclosures are really focused on taking TCFD forward, exploring physical risks, transition risks, and opportunities, pushing for industry-specific disclosures. So there are metrics and targets relevant across different industries, and guidance for metrics builds on the ISSB standards. So climate information, why is this important? Why should we be looking at this? The reason that we should be looking at this is that the effects of climate-related risks and opportunities are really about looking at the future and really about helping an institution understand what that future may look like and what are the ways in which challenges may arise and how might those challenges be addressed going forward. And so a big area to think about is what strategies the firm has for dealing with those challenges, where are its biggest risks and where are its opportunities. How set up for success is this? In some ways, this is what finance is all about, which is making a prediction about the future. Will that business be able to pay back the credit we've extended it? Will that business grow if we're investing in it? Will that company that we've underwritten experience a claim event during the time of the policy? All of those are the kinds of questions that we want to be asking and thinking about how the company can adapt its planning and what are the ways in which it's showing itself to be ready for climate. So I would say that the main points here around materiality of climate information is that it's not separate from main financial disclosures, but it's how does it adjust the financial reality and well-being. The next thing I would mention is that when it comes to climate disclosures, I talked about the fact that transition planning is expected, discussing both targets and use of offsets, climate resilience. So how is the firm going to be stable both in a decarbonizing world and in a climate impacted world? And then using the GHG protocol to disclose emissions, especially important for financial firms, not just scope 1 and 2 operational emissions, but also scope 3. And the key here is materiality is determined by the institution or by the supervisor implementing the standards. A couple things to mention around scope 3 emissions, because I know that that is one of the bigger challenges for institutions. So this uses the greenhouse gas protocol for expressing the materiality of different emissions. It also asks for estimation techniques and transparency in the calculation methods. And for financed emissions, this is where both asset managers, asset owners, banks, and insurers are expected to report those business activities and their financed emissions. However, we know that this is going to be an increase in challenge for many institutions who are just getting up to speed. And so there is relief in certain areas. So the first is that for scope 3, for when first applying S2, there can be an exemption from this disclosure. So this can be phased in later. Also, there's an opportunity to use information from companies in their value chain that are aligned to a different reporting cycle. So if you don't have that information at the time of your disclosure, it can be supplemented later. In addition, the goal, and this is, I think, really important, is about using reasonable and supportable information available without undue cost or effort. And then finally, on a guidance standpoint, the framework for scope 3 measurement is about incorporating estimations. And so the idea is that there is going to be estimations. We're never going to have all the data. And the goal isn't to wait around till we do, but to be working in parallel to improve our data as we're figuring these challenges out. Scenario analysis is probably, in addition to scope 3, one of the other big questions and challenges that many people are interested in when it comes to to this topic. And that is the fact that guidance is asking for scenario analysis commensurate with company's circumstances. So a smaller and less complex organization may conduct more qualitative scenario analysis. Also, a firm that is less exposed to certain risks isn't going to be expected to run scenarios that cover those risks if they're not material. The goal is to think about, again, reasonable and supportable information and thinking about the capacity of the company. These things will be one of the key questions. And then to one of the more important ones, what scenarios should we use? Companies might want to look at the scenarios from the Network for Greening the Financial System. For climate risk, these are free and open source. They might also want to look at scenarios from the International Energy Agency. And the process of going through that is really one of the keys and most important things when it comes to making a scenario analysis disclosure, is looking at comparability. Is this something that we have access to, that we can use to compare ourselves to others, that we can use to express and discuss with clients? And so that's where those public scenarios are useful. In addition, I would say that the idea of this commensurate approach is very much what the TCFD talked about when it covered what they called stages of progression. So starting with, we're just beginning in this process, we're gaining experience, and we're advanced. In the beginning, qualitative narratives are the starting point, which is take an open source narrative, read about it, understand what it means, and then discuss at a management level what the implications might be for your firm. As you gain experience, it's beginning to say, how do we put some numbers to this? How big are these changes in terms of emissions reductions, in terms of physical impacts? Let's begin to get an exposure-based view. This is where things like heat mapping can be particularly useful. And then finally, in an advanced way, can we use either statistical models, simulation models, or others to begin relating the parameters in the scenario to the risks and opportunities we may face as a firm? And so the goal is to think about what is the appropriate level for these companies, and also to think about how to improve resilience over time, rather than saying, hey, we need to start at the end. Start at the beginning instead and build up the knowledge and skills that you have. Finally, when it comes to application, how do we actually put this to use? And I think about use both internally and externally. Internally in the sense of what the firm is doing with this information to make strategic decisions, to engage with clients, and externally in terms of the reporting into the public market, into regulators, into stakeholders. And so a few of the key questions around application are using clear terminology and concepts, making this point about proportionality, which is, again, focusing on avoiding undue cost and effort, and considering the size and complexity of the company through its skills, capabilities, and resources. There's also ongoing work, I'm involved with it as well, in capacity building and helping to educate firms about the standards. There'll be tools, guidance, resources on this scenarios hub that are being developed. And then other elements such as qualitative scenario analysis as a starting point for understanding more quantitative analysis. Finally, just to mention again some of the reliefs that exist, the ability to provide sustainability risks beyond climate-related information. This isn't required at present in this first year. The timing of reporting, so if things are from a 2021 cycle or 2022 cycle, that will be okay in this first year. Scope 3, we talked about. The greenhouse gas protocol, if not necessarily material, and then comparative reporting as far as reporting on these elements. That is also something that this first year phase-in will see relief from. So once again, just to recap on the timings here, when it comes to S1 and S2, we've talked a bit more about S1, and as mentioned, I wasn't here for that discussion. So, I think we're able to move on to S2. The reporting period, again, is going to be from 2024. The expectation is that the standards will be available for use about 6 months before, so in June. And then there's no requirements to provide interim sustainability reporting or comparative information in the first annual reporting period. And then the focus here is really on climate. So if you're working on a broader sustainability concern, this is relevant for S1 and S2. The priority is going to be climate. And so part of this is building on what the investor community needs, what the supervisory community needs, how to leverage existing standards, how to allow this to phase in through the reliefs, and allow the capacity building and ongoing work to be scaled up. And so there's a lot of companies that are currently disclosing to CDP, and this information will be useful in that process. So finally, as mentioned, just how is the ISSB going to help with this? They're going to be providing guidance specifically with the standards themselves, as well as case studies and examples. This is illustrative guidance, and then educational materials. So these are tools that will help preparers make their disclosures. And so that provides a little bit of a overview of what the processes are, what will phase in when, and what some of the challenges are when it comes to the ISSB standards. So I see that there are a few questions, so I'll take those first before we go into our group. So the first is on Africa. I would say that by and large, in terms of climate disclosure requirements, they're going to vary by country. Certain countries such as Kenya have made climate-related financial disclosures an expectation. Others are adopting for their securities markets the guidance of IOSCO. As mentioned, that is still in process, the approval of IOSCO. It's expected, but that will then provide a similar landscape, but it really is at the country-by-country level. The next element is on the topic of S1 and S2. Will these become compulsory? This is really going to depend on the jurisdiction itself. The aim here is that non-public companies should be disclosing too. There isn't a distinction that is made explicitly between public and non-public companies. Indeed, the goal here is to create transparency and availability of information on non-public companies. But as mentioned a few times in terms of the relief offered, there's a significant opportunity to do more and to balance the level of resources and skills within the firm with the detail and expectations around the disclosure. And then finally, on the last question that I see here before we open it up to a broader set of conversations, would these disclosures not impede the ability of countries to be able to exploit their own natural resources to the level that they can now embrace sustainability? The vision here is not that these are setting standards around what sort of activities should or shouldn't be done, but rather creating transparency. So if a country is developing and is focusing on its more extractive industries, the goal here is to simply provide transparency around this. The International Sustainability Standards Board is not setting environmental standards. So, okay, we can't exploit this mineral resource, or, oh, it's better to have lower carbon or a higher share of renewable energy. Those things may be something on a global level that we explore and discuss, but the standards here really are about transparency to say, hey, this international company is financing a lot of things that are highly carbon intensive, or hey, this local company that we didn't have any data on is in significant need of transition finance to take advantage of the local climate opportunities. How do we support that? And so the goal here really is informational rather than restrictive. But I think it's a good question, and I think it's a particularly good question given the challenges that we face between balancing development concerns and environmental concerns. So I think it's really well taken. So I'm just looking at other questions that we might have, but I'll pause just at the end of this presentation to hear about if there's anything else that you'd like to discuss on the ISSB S2 or more around reporting broadly. So I'm not seeing any other questions yet, so maybe over to Ibuka and anything that you would want to ask about, and then we can go into the remaining questions that folks might have.
Yes, so I've not seen any other questions. You've taken most of them on the Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A, and then we'll take it from there. But David, I think I would ask you one or two questions myself. So the focus right now is on the S2 standards, which are primarily climate related from 1st of January 2024. Yeah. Do we have any models? Are there companies which are currently using the TCFD standards in Africa? Is there someone who we can actually look up to as a model for learning?
Yeah, so there's a number of companies. The TCFD has a useful database of reports, and those reports done by both geography as well as and so there are some in South Africa. There are also some in Egypt. This isn't a comprehensive list, the TCFD Hub reports, but I will share this in here in the chat for everyone. That's one place to look. Egypt has done some work on this, and then Kenya as well. I'm just going to try to share the links here, and just to mention, the bigger institutions like CIB in Egypt is a good example. You can see some of their work. In addition to that, I would also mention that in different countries, looking at some of the development banks that are operating, they also have done TCFD reports, and while those are going to be a bit different in the work that they're doing, they're going to be quite similar in the exposure and dealing with some of the challenges around limited data. So whether it's, I know speaking with the IFC, they've done work, but also so has the AFDB, and there's some work that was done on disclosure expectations that I'm going to just also share. This was around, let me see if this is the right one for you. There's this climate risk regulation in Africa's financial sector. So I'll just share this as well. I think this one is the one that I had been an editor on that I also think is quite relevant. So I think those two resources certainly are starting points for those in Africa, but fundamentally, I think the TCFD framework is one that is highly adaptable. So you needn't feel like it has to look the exact same, but it's a particularly flexible framework. So as long as you're going through the questions of that, I think we'll get some of the answers. And then one other piece I would mention is we have a forthcoming report that will work on the consideration of how the ISSB standards can be applied for organizations that are just getting started. So that's another area to explore.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have a question in the Q&A.
Oh yeah, I see this.
Yeah. Is the
So
ISSB looking into?
Yeah, so I don't know if a tool itself that is being accessed or developed online, but I think there will be frameworks. Those may include things like a specific template in an Excel-based format. There'll also be reports. There'll be information on how to cover each of the elements of the standards, and then there'll be recordings and webinars. So as far as a tool goes, I'm not certain that there'll be a tool. Some people that have done work on a tool in the past are the Institute for International Finance. And I'll share that tool with you. This is, let me just see where this is. They have a guidance template. Yeah, here it is. Guidance template here. So I'll just share that as well as a resource that is kind of like what you're talking about, but isn't sort of a pre-filled tool, but a way to structure some of the thinking.
Okay, thank you, David. One more question would be around, we had identified the oil and gas sector as a significant sector for emissions control. And some of our respondents also think that the financial services sector would play a key role. So in terms of these disclosures, how would you think, is it possible for us to, for one, to be able to measure the impact of, so if a company which has the best disclosures, how does that translate to tangible emissions reduction, for example?
Yeah, so I think that good disclosures, like good financial reporting, is a precondition, but not an indication of good practice. For example, a company can have a complete annual report that shows that they're bankrupt. That doesn't make it a good company to finance or invest. So the thing that we really need to be doing is moving from what are the standards to getting to the next step, which is how do we assess what good is? Not did you complete it, did you cover all of the elements, but rather compared to your peers, compared to year over year, how are these changes happening? Is progress being made? And that to me is where we go from being preparers of this information to users of this information. So I really think that that's the main consideration. So it's not simply, if this information is just about who is putting out a report versus not. And I was at Bloomberg office yesterday and we were talking about tools and assessments. And one of the things that they have as a flag in their ESG products is, did they submit a TCFD report? And that's good in the sense that all else equal, it probably suggests more interest and more resources on sustainability, but it doesn't make them better prepared for the future. It doesn't make them less risky or less exposed to climate change. And that's why the comparison is really, what we're trying to do now is build up enough comparability that this can be easily and reasonably assessed.
Okay, thank you for that, David. I would wait for any more questions. But let me just also ask, when it comes to the financial services sector, like insurance, for example, I know that they're like the primary risk taker, you know. They act as the risk offset, you know, in most cases. So do they have any peculiar requirements? Do they have any more stringent reporting requirements?
Yeah, so there are sector-specific disclosures that do focus on the insurance sector as well, that look at both their underwriting. Again, some of these things begin to shade into the topic of financial reporting and financial risks. So it's not as if what's being asked about is, oh, what is, say, the quality of the underlying assets? That kind of is something that, you know, exists in existing financial reporting. But what should happen is that there are specific standards, especially around what types of underwriting you're doing and how you might be exposed to risks, both on the physical and transition sides from the activities you're undertaking.
Okay, great. So I'll look out for any more questions from our audience.
And I'll just share my information in here for those who'd like to connect afterward, both via LinkedIn as well as on you know, my email as well. So if you do come up with questions or thoughts afterward, don't hesitate to reach out. A number of the things that we've also worked with individual institutions on, more on an advisory basis, is thinking about getting started in this this space. So very happy to continue and consider those conversations as well.
Great. Thank you, David. So I would believe that we don't have any more questions. In the absence of any other questions, please feel free. Okay, I see one from one of our members. It says, what's your take around ESG and the ISSB sustainability disclosures? Because 70% of our participants think that they are the same.
So I think that ESG has been kind of a shorthand for sustainability. In some ways, I would say the differences are that sustainability tends to be more focused on some of the E components. I think there's what I'd call broad and narrow sustainability. Narrow sustainability is about sustainability on subjects such as nature, on pollution, on climate, thinking about the sustainability of the ecosystem in which we operate as human beings. Then there is what I'd call financial sustainability, and that is much more broad, and that extends to creating systemic resilience. So when we talk about a sustainable financial system, different than sustainable finance, what we're talking about is a system that will be resilient in the face of a changing world, that will support that changing world, and will also be able to thrive under conditions that are different than today. So that's sort of, as I see, the broad and narrow definitions of sustainability. ESG is a set of criteria that can intersect and may have indicators that help one think more about sustainability. So is a firm likely to be more sustainable if it treats its workers well? Yes. Is a firm that is likely to have lower footprint on a financed emission side going to be potentially more sustainable? Yes. On a governance side, is good governance an important thing for overall resilience in that broad definition of sustainability? Yes, but I see these as kind of elements and characteristics of what is an ethos. ESG, the problem I think we saw when there was a lot of work around ESG ratings is these things are all important, but they don't always link together perfectly well. So it's not necessarily appropriate for us to say, oh, well, you know, E plus S plus G equals this, because when we try to do that, we realize, how do I weight whether it's more important that you pay your workers a fair wage or that you have adequate separation between your governing board and your executives versus how much pollution is being financed? These things are all important, but they're not necessarily the same. And so sustainability is that broad concept. ESG are these sort of relevant indicators in certain areas that one can think of. But again, they are very similar. And I think that it's not, in some cases, we know it when we see it. So it's not really always fair to say, oh, well, I thought you were talking about ESG and we're talking about sustainability. Typically, what we're referring to is a similar idea of both more sustainable societies, sustainable organizations, and more resilient ones as well.
Great. So thank you very much, David. I think I'll just put in one final question before we call it a day. I would want you to put on an investor's cap, so assume you control where you determine where money flows go to. What would you look out for in a sustainability report? What would be the key things you'd want to see?
So to me, what I'd like to see is, I actually think people underrate the opportunity side. And you saw that in one of the pages I shared, that I want to see how the firm is planning on adapting to a changing environment. I think most of us with a bit of thinking can identify some of the risks that will be caused. I want to know how you're positioning yourself, how you're changing your strategy to succeed in the future. I also want to know at an executive level, in terms of good governance, that this is something that isn't just being prepared by a few people in a back office, but that there is knowledge and ownership at the senior levels. And that can be in terms of incentives. It can also be in terms of other education and knowledge building. And then the third thing I would say is looking at the metrics to the extent that we can assess, is this firm better positioned because when we compare it, say, to industry averages, its emissions are lower? That's not the only consideration. We can invest in very unworthy credit unworthy companies that have low emissions, or very strong ones with high emissions. But when we begin to have those factors, we can then add them into our initial financial calculus. So what sort of metrics are there? And then the final fourth piece is really around the plan. What plans do you have? So again, give me numbers. If you're talking about, if you're a materials company, what is your investment in low carbon materials? How much of your revenues do you think that will be in the future? Understanding what you see your path is something that then, as an analyst, I would look to evaluate and say, I think that this well aligns with the future I see, or they really haven't given enough detail, so this is more wishing than planning.
Thank you very much, David. Very insightful comments there. So on that basis, I would call it an end to this section of our conversations. Thank you, David, for your contributions, and we'll definitely be coming back to you as much as possible as things evolve.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure to be here with you, and very much looking forward to the next session. All the best.
Thank you. So I'll call on thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'll call on our executive director to give the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Ebuka. And on behalf of the Board of Governors and members of CFA Society Nigeria, I'd like to say a very big thank you to the guest speakers for today, starting with Emmanuel Ayegba, and Samuel Agbebim, and David Carlin, of course, who did very good justice to the topic of the day, the proposed ISSB standards on sustainability and its impact on the investment industry, which I now know through this breakfast knowledge sharing session that is taking off by January 1, 2024. And they've gone through the major pillars of the sustainability disclosure reports, the IFRS, ISSB S1 and S2, and they talked to the local reporting landscape as characterized by the Nigerian Sustainability Banking Principles, the NGX Sustainability Reporting Guidelines, Foundation to ISSB sustainability, and also the types of disclosures and their requirements around governance, strategy, risk management, targets, and metrics, and also the frameworks that are needed for the disclosures to work effectively. And I'd also like to say a very big thank you to the programming committee that always put together knowledge sharing sessions. This is the second Q2 for this year. We're looking forward to the next quarter when they'll be bringing on board another stimulating topic that we'll be discussing. And on that note, I would like to say a very big thank you also to our guests that have dialed in from everywhere and have shared with us from the fountain of knowledge of our speakers. And thank you very much and have a very, very good day, everyone.
We are professionals. We are impact driven. We are CFA Society Nigeria, a member society of the CFA Institute Global Network of Societies. Our mission is to promote the highest standard of practice in the Nigerian financial services industry and provide a vibrant community for our members. The CFA Charter signals the holders' commitment to professional excellence. As thought leaders, we collaborate with stakeholders to ensure adherence to ethical standards, better education for professionals, and to build market integrity. We are the leading voice for advocacy in the finance and investment industry in Nigeria. To partner with us or become our member, visit us at cfasocietyng.org for more details. CFA Society Nigeria, making finance a force for good.